If you're happy, that's cool. If you're trying to be somebody else, you're a fool. If you're happy, cool, 'cause that's all there is.
Very excited to be here with singer, songwriter, TV star, and Ringo's producer for 10 years. Am I right about
That's
that,
right,
Mark
that's
Hudson?
right. 8 albums.
8 albums. So glad to have you here, Mark. Now tell me, you've been on all sides of the music industry.
Yeah.
Now, before the Beatles came in '64, we had rock and roll. We had Elvis, we had Chuck Berry, we had
Little Richard.
Buddy Holly.
Little Richard, Buddy Holly.
What
Neil
was it
Sedaka.
about the Beatles that changed everything?
Well, you know what it really came down to? Everybody that we're mentioning was not in a band.
Oh, okay.
And most of the bands, really, the Coasters, and there were people like that, and that was still a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Muddy Waters was one of the first guys in the blues that actually had like a band behind
Okay.
him. And the Beatles were these guys that were a band. So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they reinvented music that we already knew, as in Motown, You Really Got a Hold on Me,
Mm-hmm.
Please Mr. Postman, all of that
Till
stuff.
There Was You?
Till there, it just standard stuff, but there was a new twist to it.
Okay.
And the twist to it was their own.
Okay.
Their harmonies were like the Everly Brothers. They rocked out as Chuck Berry would ever want to. McCartney's, ooh, like Little Richard. So they didn't steal anything, but we're all motivated by something before us.
Okay.
As an instance, John Lennon to me was the universe.
He was your guy?
He was
your Beatle?
He was my Beatle.
Okay.
And I ended up writing a song based on his inspirations to me called Living on the Edge for Aerosmith that won a Grammy. I became a genius in my own pants after that. And it was because I wrote that song thinking about John Lennon.
Wow.
Something's wrong with the world today, don't know what it is.
Mhm.
It's all him.
That's
Something's
so
wrong
great.
with our eyes. And I did it, and when Steven Tyler heard it, when I played it, he went, John Lennon's in the room.
Oh.
He's in the room! And then
Oh.
screamed. And that, you take what those people give you, and then you make it your own. And the Beatles did that. And then not to mention that, and this is a God-given thing, or believe in whatever you want to believe in. They were 4 individual guys that each had a quality that the other didn't.
Mm-hmm.
John Lennon with his flared nostrils and cynical sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Paul, who was beautiful and a love god with his romantic this. George, spiritual and quiet. Ringo was like the postman. Oh, hello, everybody. And each one of them had something that we all needed or loved. Therefore, you liked them collectively, and then you also liked individually.
That's so great.
That was fantastic.
Well, take me back as a kid, as a young Mark Hudson. What was your first exposure to the Beatles?
Well, I mean, I was in school, and Dolores Freemark, girl in my class, brought a little Victrola, and there was the Capitol Records, I Want to Hold Your Hand. And when I heard that, I went, oh my God, what is that? We all went crazy. Then Ed Sullivan, and when you saw that, whatever, and then my mom, because we grew up without a father, the 3 brothers, my mom worked in a factory, saved her money, and got us tickets to see the Beatles.
What a mom.
I know.
What a mom.
I know. It was my first and only homosexual experience. Everything was tingling and moving, and I saw John Lennon with that hat stuff, and I went, whatever that is, I want to be that.
Yeah.
And then it was at that point, it ruined me for life.
Okay, that's great. In a good way. In a good way.
Well, thank you.
Well, and you talked about your brothers. I remember the Hudson Brothers Comedy Variety Hour.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And then, like 20 years later, I noticed your name start appearing on Aerosmith albums, among
Yes.
others.
Yes.
So what's the key to survival in the music industry?
Well, you know what it really is? The key, the true key to survival is songwriting. And the one thing that the Beatles brought to us was incredible songwriting that hasn't stopped till this day. 50 years later, those songs still remain. Now, once I knew that, being a Beatle freak, I knew that songs became everything. Now, from that point on, when I became a songwriter, people started doing my music based on the song. Celine Dion, Ozzy Osbourne, Aerosmith, Hanson, the Little Nazis. They were all doing it because of the songs that I was writing.
Yeah.
So I realized how important the song is.
Okay.
And that really, listen, you know what? It's lucky. I get paid a lot of money, but I write songs for free. You know, when I wrote Living on the Edge, I wrote it 5 years before I brought it to Aerosmith, just sitting in my room thinking about John Lennon. And because he was gone and no one was saying Power to the People, Instant Karma, Imagine, Give Peace a Chance. So I kind of said,
he's
living on the edge.
Yeah.
And that's, if you can judge a person by the color of his skin, mister, you're a better man than I am. And it was all based on what he had given me.
Right.
And I gave it back. But it's kind of funny to me that it wins a Grammy and becomes a success when I wrote it in a room only because I did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you think you start making money. Celine Dion, it was a song that I'd written for Aerosmith and got rejected. And they said no because Steven Tyler loved it and Joe Perry didn't. So there it went into the cornfield. 3 months later, I get a phone call saying Celine Dion just cut your song, The Reason, and said it was so Beatle-y that it was produced by George Martin, the Beatles producer. And at that point, Aerosmith was selling like 14 million copies on an album. This was Celine Dion. It sold 27 million copies. It paid for my divorce, my penis extension. It was all of that.
That is so great.
And I wrote it for nothing.
Well, you're one of those guys who I don't hate for being successful because there's clearly a very spiritual vibe to you. I've seen you involved in the rock and roll fantasy camps where that's something you don't need to be involved with that, but you're out there with future musicians and songwriters working with them and giving back. What's that all about?
Well, you know what it comes down to, and I say this when I speak at the festivals and stuff. I am also a fan. So sometimes I'm up there on stage and I'm singing or telling stories and I'm next to Klaus Vormann or whatever. But part of me is out in the audience loving what is going on, even though I've become part of the thing that it's going on for. I know that sounds weird, but I have kept that innocence of a teenager, loving it so much that I want to be around it forever. So you'll never hear me go, I'll be in my trailer, I can't work with you people anymore. It's not what I am.
That's great.
It's not what I am. I love it to the point where, I'll tell you a good story. I'm in Los Angeles and walking down the 3rd Street Promenade with Steven Tyler. And he's got some big hat because he's always bothered because he has childbearing lips and it's scary. and we're walking down the promenade and there's some young boy standing with his microphone and his hat. And he's doing like really bad versions of John Denver. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Just bad versions of John Denver. And Steven and I kind of stay away from him. And this is Steven Tyler now. This isn't me.
Right.
This is like an iconic rock guy. And he goes, I can't take this anymore. Let's go make him some money. And we walk over, and Steven puts his hat up, and the guy goes, Steven Tyler, he goes, just play another one of your bad songs. And he starts playing the song, and Steven and I start singing the background. Now, as soon as that happens, the crowd becomes 50, 60 people, and Steven's going, yeah, put money in the hat, put money in the hat. And next thing you know, it's like a stack of money. He said, why don't you do that for me? I'll start busking for that. And the kid was there, and he was overwhelmed. Steven says goodbye to him. The kid goes, can I give you a hug? And Steven goes, yeah. And while he's hugging him, Steven goes, don't do John Denver. Do some rock and roll. And the kid went back like this and looked at him like Nipper with a tilted head, like, what? And then Steven went away like the Lone Ranger into the night. Those are the people that love what they do.
Yeah.
And even though he's iconic, and Ringo's the same way. You know, Ringo would always say to me, if there's drums, I'm playing it. And didn't care who was the artist and what it was. He would hear a drum beat and he would sit behind the drums and just start drumming. That to me is God-given, or whoever you want to believe in.
Yeah.
It's a power that's bigger than us.
That's so great.
And so many of the guys that I know do that. Ozzy Osbourne, huge Beatle fan, like huge. I did an album for him called Undercovers, and on that he did 3 John Lennon songs: Woman, Working Class Hero, and In My Life.
Okay.
And Ozzy says, Mark, I met Paul McCartney. I went, really, Ozzy? That's what for the Queen of England, I met him. He goes, and I went, Ozzy, that's great. He goes, I didn't know what to say, so I was stuttering. I went, well, you're stuttering now, and I'm not Paul McCartney. But he ended up taking a picture with Paul, and he put it in a solid gold frame that he still has. And that kind of legacy, when you're not going to see that in anybody in this day and age. We really haven't seen it since them. No. And I understand that there's Prince, and I know U2. There's some beautiful music out there, but the impact of it, this has been bigger than the music.
Yeah, the Beatles changed the world.
It's pretty remarkable when you actually think. And being that kid in Portland, Oregon, seeing them on stage, never did I think in my wildest dreams that I would ever meet them, let alone produce 8 records with Ringo. Every Beatle yelled at me except for Paul.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was sworn at by every Beatle.
Nice.
No, it was fantastic. Except for Paul. He was also he thumbed me. But never was I yelled at by McCartney.
There's time. You're young.
Oh no, I still got time. The other 3 yelled at me.
Oh, that's great.
But you know what? If ever I'm going to be yelled at, it better be by a Beatle. You know what I'm saying? Why not?
Straight. Mark Hudson, we so appreciate you taking the time out today. Keep on doing what you're doing. We
no
love
problem,
it.
my brother.
Thank you so much, man.
Peace and love.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mark Hudson, and you're watching PSYCHO BABBLE TV. Peace, love, and I'll see you around when you bend over. What?